And especially nice to see that some new connections were made, because of course that's one of the many building blocks that we are working on at Oncode Accelerator, bridging key players in our oncology ecosystem so that we can collaboratively optimize and accelerate development of new cancer therapies for the benefit of patients of all ages. And this brings me to the topic of our next session, which is a panel featuring 3 different women who all have different expertise and are going to come together to discuss how all the different building blocks that we're working on within Oncode Accelerator, but also beyond Oncode Accelerator, how they come together to bridge us towards impact. So I'm very happy to invite to the stage Conny. She's former Minister of Long-Term Care and Sport, and also a chair of the board of FAST, Future Affordable and Sustainable Therapies. Please join me on the stage. We also have joining us Ellen Moers. She's a professor of innovation and sustainability at Utrecht University and also head of the Copernicus Institute of Sustainable Development. Welcome, Ellen. And finally, we also have Jeanine Roodhart with us. She's a medical oncologist at UMC Utrecht, and she recently took the role of lead of Oncode Accelerator's patient cohorts platform. So over the course of this panel session, we'll periodically pause for audience questions. And to make this go as smoothly as possible and to get to as many of these questions as possible, we'd like to ask you to submit your questions through the QR code on the screen. You'll find a form there. You can type in your question and indicate who you want us to ask it to. You can already start. So if you have a question already, please submit it. And that's also our cue to get started with the panel. So my first question is a simple one. I'd like to ask each of you to, in a few words, in your own words, give us a bit more insight into your specific expertise and also tell us your opinion. So when we speak about moving from innovation to impact, what should that mean? Would you like to start us off, Conny?
Yes, well, my expertise and perspective is quite broad, as you mentioned, not only the things I'm doing now and as a minister, but beforehand I was in hospital care, elderly care and also primary care. But that gives me also the opportunity to look from the back end to what innovation should have as an impact, of course, for the citizen and for the people with diseases. And especially as a minister, of course, I was on the end side of the impact, and if you look at, for instance, the national parliament always wants all the new the technology and all the new treatments that are coming along, and very expensive treatments, to be available for everybody at the same time. And that's not sustainable, of course, not at the prices that we're looking on. So what I'm trying to do is to help all those ecosystems. I have different roles now in different ecosystems, and sometimes I call them ecosystems, because it's also about people collaborating, staying on the same track together, and really trying to help each other, and that's what I'm trying to do.
Yeah, the collaboratively part is important.
Yes.
Yeah. Thanks. And Ellen, would you like to answer next?
Yeah, sure. I'm originally trained as a biochemist, so years ago I really did this oncology research myself on monoclonal antibodies for lung cancer. But then during my PhDs and after working at different universities, I more and more move into understanding life sciences and health innovations in the broader sense. And later on, the sustainability aspect as broad as possible. So how can we sustain these for economic and societal value became crucial in my research. And that's what we are at the Copernicus Institute studying now in different fields, and health, life sciences, food is one of them, to see whether there are impact practices which actually work in the current time frame we are in. And that's why I am invited here, but also interested in these large programs where we really would like to make the difference over the longer time.
Yeah, in a sustainable way.
Yeah.
Thanks. And Jeanine?
Yes, so I'm a medical oncologist, did a PhD in the lab and became very enthusiastic about translational research, about actually taking patient material to the lab, discovering what's behind the tumor, what's behind the biology, and how can we use it to develop new treatments. And I've kept being very interested in that, and was lucky enough to become a medical oncologist here at UMC Utrecht at a clinical scientist position. So I divide my time between patient care and research, specialized in colorectal cancer. And for me, making impact is all about the patient. So I had my outpatient clinic this morning, and there are so many patients that I have to tell them that we don't have a treatment anymore, and that developments are just going too slow, and that we need the new developments earlier to treat these patients and to offer them an alternative treatment. So that's for me making impact. So accelerating drug development and improving outcome for patients.
Thanks, and that actually ties into my first question, which is also for you, Jeanine, with your 1 foot in patient care and 1 foot in research within your role. I wanted to know from your perspective, what are the current bottlenecks in the pipeline that are blocking accelerated translation from the lab towards the clinic?
Yeah, it's still getting a drug into the clinic is the most difficult step. And if you have 5,000 compounds in the lab, maybe 5 compounds will make it to a first-in-human study. But from those 5, only 10% will become an approved drug. So there's a real inefficient process. And that's partly because of the mismatch, I think, between the lab and the patient. So we're not using representative models enough. But maybe our clinical trials don't fit well enough with the preclinical research, and we don't have the right target population. And therefore, we really need to bring the patients in the lab. And that's the whole goal of Oncode Accelerator and of the patient cohorts, to really bring those patients in the lab so to improve this process.
Yeah, so the need for the patient cohorts platform is very clear here. Before we go further to questions, I want to already check if there's a question from the audience. So my colleague Saskia will read them out.
Is it working? Yeah, there's several questions already coming in, actually for all 3 panelists. So I'd like to start with a question for Ellen. Which sustainability metrics do you find relevant in biopharma manufacturing to be measured as KPIs? Is that a question you can answer?
Yeah, sure. Sustainability in the broader sense, so then we take the global sustainability goals, not the green sustainability, focuses on 4 A's in my perspective. So accessibility, which is a lot discussed here. Affordability, which has to do with reimbursement pricing, but also with competitive models. Availability, especially from medicines for rare diseases or for unmet medical needs. And also acceptability, and there societal needs and also preferences or patient preferences come in. And these 4, you can think of KPIs or metrics which you can develop further depending on the specific therapy or technology you're working on.
I'm curious, Conny, if from a governmental perspective, you also have some ideas around this. Like the accessibility and acceptability were things that you mentioned when we spoke briefly before the panel. Would you also like to reflect?
Yes, of course, especially when you think about a perspective from a minister, you have to make sure that you spend your money well. So it's all about impact and which generates the best impact. So, and that's something I think as a whole ecosystem, we need to get the word out of the excellent work that is being done. We could see that this afternoon. And building this accelerator like Oncode Accelerator and making sure that we have more impact. But we have to influence also the political climate to make sure that we have stable funding, and not funding for just, one period of one government, especially not when it only lasts for a year or a year and a half, but we have to do that in a longer term perspective so that we can have an environment where it's also predictable for entrepreneurs, for companies, what type of frameworks do we have, policy frameworks, and what type of funding do we have to make sure that it matures. And I think maturing the ecosystem is one of the biggest challenges ahead. Yeah,
thanks. And at risk of sounding like a broken record, it ties into something I've said a few times today, which is it took us a lot of time to lay the foundation for our program, but it's it's an important step to take.
Maybe to add something to that, it's not only about the Oncode Accelerator ecosystem. About 2 days ago, we had a memorandum of understanding with 8 growth fund initiative to make sure that they collaborate and form a bigger ecosystem. And I think that's the way forward. We have to be stronger and make sure that the rest of the public understands what we are doing, so that the funding may come along, I hope, in the future. Yeah.
Thanks. And I think we have more audience questions, so let's take another one.
Yes, Conny, it actually is a nice follow-up question from what you were already discussing about how we need to inform politics as well. So this question specifically is, how can politics and a forthcoming cabinet in the Netherlands in particular help accelerate the shift from innovation to tangible societal impact? And I think you touched upon it a little bit already, but would you like to elaborate?
Could you repeat the question? Because it's a little bit a hollow sound at my...
Sorry.
No, maybe you can repeat it. It's better to understand.
Can you repeat?
Yeah,
it?
no worries.
That's also
no, it's how can the cabinet, the forthcoming cabinet in the Netherlands, help to accelerate the shift from innovation to tangible societal impact?
Oh, yeah. Well, I think first of all, there have to be a fan in order to do that. They have to see the possibilities, not only when it comes to great science that we have in the Netherlands, but also the valorization pathways. And also because it's important, because if we have better treatments for people with cancer, it's also better for the rest of society. It's better for the cost in healthcare. So they have to be really a huge fan of that, and then they have to support it, not only for just 1 year or one period, but they have to support it like they did earlier on in the National Growth Fund. And I'm a little bit concerned, but also happy when I see the first products coming out of the next government, because they already mentioned it. But now the very exciting thing is the money coming along and also the support coming along. Because we have to have a long haul and over a longer period of time, we have to support this.
Yeah. I'm curious, being someone who does see patients every day, what are your reflections on this? So taking this longer term approach to research and making sure it really gets to patients?
Yeah, I think affordability is of course key, because in the end, if you just get more cancer drugs with all very little benefit, that's not affordable, and we can't do that. And I think also as medical doctors, we do feel that there should be rules about when is a drug good enough, and that perhaps we should be more stringent in order to spend the money well and not spend the money on drugs which only give a very little benefit. On the other hand, what you do see is that these drugs work, but we just have to find out for who. And I think we should invest more in giving the right patient the right treatment, because I think we have quite a lot of good drugs and we do need new drugs, but we also need to learn who will benefit, because if your patient selection will be better, then maybe we will give the drug to only 10% of the patients, but those patients will benefit, and then it's money well spent. While if we treat everyone and only 10% will benefit, then the patient has toxicity and suffers, and it costs a lot of money. So I think working on biomarkers and optimizing patient selection is very important, and to start that early on and to include that also in the preclinical research.
Yeah, it ties nicely into the discussion session that you were just a part of as well, how to overcome the translational gap between preclinical and clinical stages and make sure that we do develop drugs with high efficacy in the patients they're intended to treat. So the next question I had is zooming out a little bit again, and especially this one is for you, Conny. It's considering all of these challenges that we have, what kind of policy frameworks do you think are really effective at accelerating, especially the transition from the lab towards the clinic? Is there something we can do beyond Oncode Accelerator to make this happen?
Well, of course, a couple of the key elements we already mentioned. There has to be a stable funding. There has to be regulation that grows along with the innovation. I think you could also look at Oncode Accelerator as the way forward to learn to innovate. We have to do that in a different way than we used to do with the normal drug programs. So that is something, and what I said again was we have to make sure that we influence the political climate, that they understand what we are doing, and make sure that the funding comes along also. And it's very important not only to have effective treatments, but just what you said, we have to select patients better to make sure that the effectiveness, but it also has to be based on equity, because that's very important when it comes to funding and political decision making. It's not only when you are in the possibility to be in a clinical trial. For some people it's easier than for other people, but we have to make sure that treatments are available for all Dutch people, of course. And it's not only about difficulties ahead, it's also about opportunities, I think. I think what I learned in the past couple of months doing this is that we have excellent breakthroughs and excellent science in the Netherlands, but it's the valorization pathways that we need to redesign, not only here for cancer, but also for regenerative medicine. And that's something we're working on also with FAST, to make sure that we help to redesign those pathways.
Yeah, and clearly it works when we do it, as we saw in Jan Paul Medema's presentation from before the break. If we do make those investments, it pays out 14 to 16-fold, as he shared with Oncode Institute's experience. And I could see you nodding. Yeah, would you like to add to this?
Can I add one point? What I see in more National Growth Fund projects, and where I really see the added value is because they have this 10-year time span, and they have all this data infrastructure and try to have that open or at least shared to some extent. And with all the new AI technologies also being more and more involved, I do see a lot of opportunities there. So cross-fertilization and use of these data, and also probably we don't know yet, because some are rather low TRLs and very curiosity-driven, what these data will mean over in 2030. And then that memory of understanding was beautiful last Tuesday, because what's gained there on information collected, that's unique. And that we should really cherish. And it could not be done in a one PhD 4-year project and then the other call comes. That's, I think, something, and then I fully agree with you. Yeah. You need also at Parliament and in the ministries people who grasped it and dare to try put it forward, because it's high risk, high gain. And I think that's the message also for impact pathways in the end, especially for these ones.
Take the risk, and then we'll have a high gain. And I could see you nodding to this as well. I think this is a comment you can agree with based on your work with
absolutely. And I think that's also what we want to build. In Oncode Accelerator, we really want to build these platforms and make them sustainable, that they continue. And if I look at patient cohorts, if we develop them now and they become sustainable, then they can run, well, forever, but and then we can really learn from every patient and move towards a learning healthcare system where new therapies come in, we evaluate their efficacy, we learn from who it works, and then the advice goes back to a new patient. So we can treat every patient better and better by having a learning healthcare system. And that only works when we use all these real-world data from patients, preferably real time, have that in cohorts, and make that a circle.
Yeah, then it becomes an iterative cycle and becomes more sustainable. So I know we have more questions from the audience. Saskia, would you like to read out a couple, or one at a time?
Yeah, there's a lot. So thanks everyone for being in engagement. Maybe one for Jeanine. How can researchers and academic institutes actively shape the direction of drug development that have the most impact for patients? In support of just leaving it to industry?
Yeah, well, I think a lot of research, of course, starts and should start in academia. There's a lot of curiosity-driven research in academia, and that's essential, and that's very important. But it really helps if fundamental researchers collaborate with clinicians, and that clinicians start to understand the lab work, and then that you have people who can make that bridge, because then you can take all these new findings from the lab and see how it has a clinical purpose and match it to a clinical need. So I think we need a lot more persons who can bridge that gap, and that should come from both the clinicians and from the fundamental scientists to work on that mismatch.
And then also people who can explain it to people in the government and so on.
Yeah, sure, but if I can add to that, one thing we are pushing, from FAST, is to look at how can we make the public-private partnership really work. And something like social responsible licensing might help to make sure that we don't stack up all the costs with every new product. And those are also things we need to work on, and that will help as well.
I can see you nodding, Ellen.
Yeah,
Would you like to add?
recognize that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it will also make it easier to collaborate with companies, because now it's often quite difficult to get access to drugs, to do proof of concept studies, and if that collaboration would be easier, I think we could achieve much more.
Yeah.
Thanks. Since we have lots, let's take another audience question.
This comes back a couple of times, but how can we also really make sure that, you know, everybody here is very open to collaboration, right? We set up the infrastructures for collaboration. How do we really ensure that we're bringing along the policymakers? Who would like to start?
Yeah, if I can answer it, I'd say talk about what you're doing, make sure that everybody understands it. Because in our Dutch culture, working with public money and private company is already complicated. That's not Dutch, you know, we find it very difficult. But I'm sure that when everybody in the home, when they look at the television, understand what we are doing here, to make sure that people have a better life fighting cancer, that it's also much better for a society, that we don't have the treatments that we're having today, but we have better treatments that treat the causes of cancer. I'm sure that there's much more support for that, but it's very difficult to find. You can look at the television every night. I don't do that because it's very boring. And it goes about a lot of topics, but almost never about this. And I think it's very important also, the very young scientists, to go out there and just show what you're doing, because it's really impacting on people's lives. And that's where we can also make sure that the parliament understands this, and also the policy makers on the ministerial side. I'm an optimist, I'm a liberal, I'm a very optimistic person, but I think showing is key also.
And what you could also do is, in these kind of long-term projects, bring the risk assessors and the regulatory people earlier into the projects. I think that's also in Oncode the case, but I see that in some of these NWA transdisciplinary projects, where the risk assessments were part of the project proposal. So in the end, that's a kind of regulatory science. They bring out their ideas, because regulation innovation is always iterative in movement with each other. And the regulation is always too late and too slow, and etc. So you hope that you can fasten it in that way. And another track could be the educational track. When we teach the new students about all these developments, they should also be on board to see these hiccups, because it's very interesting to work on that. And in the end, they are a part of our society, or maybe part of our parliament in the end.
Yeah, that's indeed something that we try to embed within Oncode Accelerator. Bastian mentioned it at the beginning of the presentation, and we also have, I know, a few PhD students working on regulatory innovation in the audience today. Yeah. Nice to hear you think that's a good idea from our side. Saskia,
That actually answered one of the questions, so thank you, Ellen. Maybe another question for Jeanine. Since you mentioned patient stratification using biomarkers and developing this early in preclinical stage, what kind of patient-centric efforts can help this, and what can be improved in the Netherlands or within our program to enable this?
Yeah, I think in order to study patient stratification, you need to capture the heterogeneity. So therefore we need actually these large patients cohorts to capture heterogeneity and to be able to look at small subgroups and to have the tissue and the blood of these patients with the clinical data and the clinical outcome. And that way you can learn who responds. But that also allows you, if you have organoids from these patients, of tissues from these patients, to develop therapies and to see for whom does this work. And then you search for an organoid like me, something like that approach, from your patient. And if you can match that to your preclinical research, you can learn what patient characteristics are key. And then you can find that back in your cohort and select the right patient for the right treatment.
And that's also something that you've been doing with colorectal cancer already.
Exactly, yeah, we're doing that with colorectal cancer. There we have quite a large cohort with 25,000 colorectal cancer patients in the Netherlands. For a lot of these patients with tissue and blood, so I think that's a very good use case to start with.
Thanks. Yeah. Then my next question is for you, Ellen. So as head of the Copernicus Institute for Sustainable Development, what should or does sustainable development mean in terms of oncology? So not everyone is familiar with the term.
Yeah.
Can you explain?
Some of these elements I already mentioned, so always keep this broader perspective that it's not only efficacy and safety, but that it's also affordability and accessibility, and then you have all kind of socio-economic aspects which also need to be taken into account. Also acceptability, that could be ethical, but that could also be broader societal. I was in a breakout session about the role of these organoid models versus moving towards reducing animal testing, and that's a societal and also policy debate up also in these days. And I think Oncode Accelerator can contribute to that with some of these key projects. But in the end, what I really find interesting, you are developing alternative innovations and alternative regulatory pathways. And if that's really coming together, could be followed over 10 years' time, for me that could be sustained. So
really
that's the way forward to
change.
break through these elements which we all mentioned here as the barriers why the system is too slow and the patient is the unmet medical need of the patients. And on the other hand, it could also have spillovers to other sectors. So I read when I came in the new report of the Gezondheidsraad, which said we should even eat less meat than was assumed 10 years ago because of the colon cancer as one of the effects. And then I was thinking, this Oncode project delivers fundamental knowledge which could have real spillovers, cross-fertilization to other sectors. And that is possible because of the largeness, the time, these public-private partnerships which are built and hopefully sustained, also over the next generation researchers. So I see there the opportunities.
Yeah, so not just implementing the individual innovations again, but really changing the system around
the
them
ecosystem,
to make sure
like Conny said.
Lasts beyond us. Yeah. Thanks. Conny, you were nodding as well. Would you like to add?
I totally agree with what you said. That's, I think, the strong point of Oncode Accelerator, that the whole system is in the room, starting the program and the demonstrator projects, and really addressing the bottlenecks that you have in translation. So I think that's a very strong point. And also the spillover, what we said with the other 7 growth funds initiative, to learn from each other, because we're really working out how innovation in this time and place works. And we have to speed up, I think, because our scientists are so excellent to have treatments and ideas all the time. So to keep up and to make sure that they're really affordable and really accessible, I think we have to speed up together.
Yeah. Oncode Accelerator.
Really accelerate, yeah.
You alluded to this already, Ellen, in your last answer, but I'm curious from all of you, if we think a little bit more broadly, of course, we want to have impact for patients, but we also indeed hope to have impact for society more broadly, also the Dutch economy. So what do you think we should be aiming for in terms of these bigger picture impacts?
Well, of course, it helps when it also helps the economy. It helps for the government to make sure that there is funding for research. Because, especially in this day and age, it's, the industry policy is really at top of mind of the government. And also the general condition of the population. We have to be a healthy population, so we have to do a lot about prevention. We have to have housing to live in, we have to have jobs. I think that is really always top of mind for every government. So it really helps if it does also have a good, we can help the good industry policy. Yeah. That was not correct English, but I hope you do understand. Yeah.
Thanks. And would you like to add, Ellen?
Yes, I was thinking, one of the speakers early this afternoon mentioned that we are in the top 3 with this particular research, and that we should spare that, we should spread that message and also build on that. And what we do in this project, with also the supporting infrastructures and develop the missing facilities, I read somewhere, I think, yeah, that's exact what we need now to sustain that for the longer term. And then I agree with Conny, people healthier, so a more powerful working force, but also being top one in fundamental knowledge. And geopolitically, if we would like to have a more independent Europe, I think this is the strength we should cherish.
Yeah, strengthen the science, strengthen the economy, and that will bring impact for patients as well.
And strengthening the workforce.
Yeah.
And that in total will make a strong Holland, a strong Netherlands in Europe.
Yeah.
And I think we have the opportunity, so we have to act now. Yeah.
Then going back to the focus on patients, you mentioned that we want to develop therapies for all patients, patients of all ages, but also patients who may not always be eligible for inclusion in a traditional clinical trial. So could you share how you want to make this process more equitable?
Yeah, so I think by having the patient cohorts, that means that it's quite a broad informed consent. So it's very easy for patients to participate. So that means that we will also include elderly patients, frail patients, patients from different backgrounds who may not enter clinical trials, but they will enter a patient cohort. So that means that we can learn from these patients and include them in studying heterogeneity and study drugs which work on specific subgroups and learn what works for everyone. But it will also help to validate new drugs. If a drug becomes registered, we can prescribe it to everyone, but not everyone participated in the clinical trial, so usually there's a mismatch, and you will see that a new drug will be less effective if you just give it to everyone. And I think that's, with a learning healthcare system, very important to learn who does it work for, and does it work for the persons who did not participate in the clinical trial. And it can be that you will find a population where perhaps it works even better, but more likely it's that it will work less. But it's important to learn, also to keep it affordable and to learn who to offer which treatment.
Yeah, we need to know the good news and the bad news.
Exactly.
Thanks. Then let's go back in the last few minutes to audience questions. Saskia, do we have some more?
Yeah, and unfortunately we cannot address all of them, but I like this one particularly. It's for all panelists. Fast forward to 2032, when the Oncode Accelerator program technically finishes. Do you have a vision, or how can you explain the vision and the value for after the program ends? Maybe we start with Jeanine.
Yeah, so I think when the program ends, we have, well, at least 10, 12 patient cohorts. The aim is, of course, to do it for all tumor types, where we have broad consent of these patients, where we have real-time, good quality clinical data with tissue and blood available. So when new ideas come in, when new drugs come in, this can be used, and all these data can be used for drug development, and we will make the first step by, well, testing whether the proof of concept works. So going back to patients and actually looking what comes out of the demonstrators, what was discovered on these organoid and the patient material, and can we start first in human trials to really show that we actually accelerated drug development and improved drug development by showing that it will deliver more effective drugs. So I hope by then we will be able to do the first trials to show that by using these representative model systems and the patient materials, we will have much more effective drugs.
I was thinking in 10 years, 8 years' time, we have a fully developed product portfolio and also an ingrained innovator-regulator system, so that should, because of this large network, should be way more ingrained with also international connections, because then because you need to work with your competition, so find there your key players where you can build even stronger coalitions to have this mighty position in the oncology innovation from position 3 to position 2 or even 1.
Well, I do hope that by that time we can see that Oncode Accelerator was just not a program, but it was really a way to innovate in a very innovative way, very new way. And I think that if we can show that we didn't only accumulate and accelerate new ideas, but also accelerated when it came to the benefits for society, not only for patients, but for society as a whole. And we can get out that, we can spread the word about that, of course, and that we can say we were really leading in the Netherlands with new business models when it comes to ATMPs and this kind of treatments. I think that's important as well. And to take that position also as the Netherlands in a way that our government of 8 to 10 years' time will say, well, this is an industry we really have to protect and help. And I think then we're really there. Yeah.
Thanks. It's a good, another moonshot, or a few moonshots to aim for. Then let's finish with one last audience question, since we have a very enthusiastic audience. Saskia, would you like to pick one?
Sure. I wasn't prepared, sorry.
Sorry. Surprise.
Okay, let's take this one for Conny and or Ellen. So again, we talked a little bit about the vision of the program. We also talked about collaboration. Is there any additional advice that you can give us to facilitate more knowledge and experience sharing among different programs? So to really make a bigger impact together to push for more conducive policies and regulations for these kind of innovative approaches?
Dare to be the first mover, I would say. If we dare to share more, and I know also, of course, of the limitations, but in the end, what I see is a lot of enthusiasm on certain new research developments. If that could be spread and cross-fertilized over this program, I think that could really be helpful.
Any other last messages from the three of you?
Well, I do hope that we can, that you can show that collaboration can certainly have some competitive elements, but that collaboration is key, I think. Yeah. Because we have to build it together, and we have to be open on what you have to be open on what you are learning, to be able to learn together. And we're a very small country, but we're very good in competition. So let's show we're also even better at collaboration.
I think that's a beautiful message for us to end on. Thanks very much to the three of you for the time and sharing your expertise.